My name is Marisol Bennett. I'm 50 years old, and I used to think the scariest part of marriage was the big things: money, illness, tragedy. I was wrong. The scariest part is the small, quiet sentence that lands so softly you almost miss the moment it changes your life. It happened on a Tuesday night, one of those nights that didn't feel important while it was happening. The house was calm in that suburban way. People envy from the outside: soft lamplight, the faint hum of the refrigerator, a dishwasher running behind closed cabinets, 2 mugs in the sink, because we'd both had tea and neither of us had felt like being the one to rinse them. Our kids were grown. Kendra, 22, away at college, and Logan not far behind. The kind of empty nest people warn you about, like it's a storm you should prepare for. But we weren't fighting. We weren't screaming. We weren't throwing plates. We were just existing beside each other. Gavin was on the couch scrolling through his phone, face lit by the glow like he was watching a private movie I couldn't see. I was in my chair with my laptop open, reading an article about classic car restoration, old Mustangs, old Camaros, the kind of mechanical problems that come with clear solutions. Replace this, tighten that, clean the rust, restore the shine. My newest hobby, my newest escape. Out of nowhere, Gavin sighed. Not a dramatic sigh. The kind you make when you want someone to ask what's wrong, but you don't want to be the one to open the door. What's wrong? I asked, not even looking up right away. I expected a normal complaint, his back hurting, a neighbor being loud, the thermostat being too cold. He didn't look at me. Nothing, he said. That word. Nothing. The most dishonest word married people learn how to use like a shield. I closed my laptop slowly because something in his tone told me this wasn't about the thermostat. Gavin, I said again, gentler. What's going on? He kept staring at his screen like he needed it to give him courage. And then he said it. I wish I'd chosen a different life. The words didn't come with anger. No accusation. No fight. Just a calm confession, like he was commenting on the weather. For a second, I didn't understand. My brain did that strange thing where it tries to soften the meaning before it lets the pain in. A different life? I repeated, careful, like I was stepping across thin ice. He finally looked at me, and his eyes were tired in a way I realized I'd been ignoring. Tired, but also distant, like he'd been living somewhere else in his head for years. It means exactly what it sounds like, he said. I look at other people's lives, and I wonder what mine would have been if I made different choices. Different career, different routine, different partner, different everything. Different partner. There it was. Clean, simple, brutal. The room didn't change, but I did. I felt it, like a quiet internal click, a gear shifting out of place. Not an explosion, not a breakdown. A decision. Maybe I should have cried. Maybe I should have shouted, demanded names, demanded explanations, demanded anything that looked like a normal reaction. But what I felt was this strange, cold calm, like my body had finally stopped trying to protect a story that wasn't true anymore. I nodded once. Okay, I said. He blinked. He wasn't expecting okay. Then I added, still calm, still steady. It's not too late to start one. His eyebrows pulled together. What? A different life. I said it like I was being helpful, like I was agreeing to a request. It's not too late. He sat up. Marisol, I didn't mean... But I was already standing. I walked toward the stairs, and I could feel him watching me like he couldn't decide if I was bluffing or breaking. If that's how you feel, I said, we should do something about it. Wait, he called, sharper now. You're being ridiculous. I stopped on the first step and looked back at him. Ridiculous is pretending you didn't just tell your wife of 20 years you'd rather be living a life without her. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. I was just venting, he said, voice smaller now, like he could make it less real by shrinking it. For 20 years? I asked softly. He flinched, and that flinch told me what his words already had. I went into our bedroom and pulled out a suitcase. Not mine. His. I didn't slam drawers. I didn't throw things. I didn't rage. I moved through the room like a woman doing a task she'd been training for without knowing it. I carried his toiletries down the hall to the guest room. His toothbrush, his razor, that expensive cologne he only wore when we went out with friends. I laid them neatly on the bathroom counter like I was setting up a rental. Then I opened his closet. He appeared in the doorway halfway through, watching me fold his sweaters with a look that kept switching between disbelief and panic. This is insane, he said. Marisol, stop. I didn't stop. I folded slower. You don't say something like that unless you've been thinking it for a while, I said, placing another stack into the drawer. He swallowed. And he didn't argue with that. That night, I slept alone in our bed. And the sick part? I slept better than I had in months. The bed felt bigger, yes, but it also felt clearer, like someone had finally taken a heavy weight off my chest, and I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying it. Wednesday morning, I woke early, made coffee, and sat on the front porch to watch the sun come up over the neighbor's fence. The air was cold enough to sting my cheeks, and I liked it. It made me feel awake, present. At 7:30, a car pulled into the driveway. A gray SUV I recognized immediately. My brother Caleb stepped out first, then his wife Nora, both carrying travel mugs like this was a casual visit. Then another car, my parents, Elaine and Harold. Then a truck I could identify by sound alone. Travis, my best friend since high school, pulling up like he'd been called for an emergency. Because he had. I'd lined up extra chairs from the garage the night before. They sat down on the porch like a quiet panel, coffee cups in hand, murmuring to each other the way people do when they're trying to pretend they're not here for something serious. At 8 o'clock, the front door opened behind me. Gavin stepped out in sweatpants, hair messy, eyes still swollen from a night of restless sleep. He froze. His gaze moved across the porch. Caleb, Nora, my parents, Travis. A circle of people who had watched him marry me, watched him hold our babies, watched him toast anniversaries, watched him build a life beside me. He stared at them like they were a hallucination. Then his eyes snapped to me. "What is this?" he demanded, voice low. "What's going on?" I took a slow sip of coffee. "Good morning," I said. Caleb's voice came next, friendly but cool. "Morning, Gavin." Gavin's face drained of color. "Why are they here?" I set my mug down carefully. "I called them last night," I said. "I told them what you said." His mouth fell open. "No," he said. "You, Marisol, you had no right." I stood up and I felt my calm harden into something sharper. "I had every right," I said evenly. "These are the people who watched me build a life with you. They celebrated our wedding. They helped us move into this house. They babysat our kids. They were here for every we're fine smile we ever faked." Gavin's hands clenched at his sides. My mother, Elaine, set her coffee down on her knee with the kind of deliberate gentleness that meant she was furious. "Actually," she said, voice smooth as glass, "I think it's very fair." Gavin's eyes flicked to her like he wanted her to rescue him the way parents sometimes do when things get uncomfortable. But she didn't. "My daughter has spent 20 years being your wife," Elaine continued, "and you told her you wish you'd chosen a different life, a different partner." Gavin's throat bobbed. "I was upset," he stammered. "I didn't mean it like that." Travis leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees, gaze steady. "How did you mean it?" he asked. The porch went quiet. Even the neighbor's dog barking down the street sounded far away, like the world was giving us space to hear the truth. Gavin looked at me then, really looked at me, with eyes that suddenly carried fear. "Marisol," he said, pleading now, "can we talk about this privately?" I tilted my head. "Why?" I asked. "You said it privately, and look where that got us." His breathing quickened. He looked from face to face, searching for softness, searching for someone to say this is too much. But everyone stayed still, and I realized something in that moment. This wasn't just a confrontation. It was a line being drawn. I stepped closer to the porch rail. "Now everyone knows," I said quietly. "Now you can have that different life you wanted, without any of us standing in your way." Gavin's lips parted as if he wanted to deny it again. But denial is hard when the truth has witnesses. And the way he stared at the chairs, the coffee cups, the people who'd come so quickly, told me he finally understood the part I hadn't said out loud. I wasn't threatening to change our life. I already had. The silence on the porch didn't last long. It never does. Gavin was the first to break it, because people who are cornered always try to turn the spotlight somewhere else. "You're all acting like I said I never loved her," he snapped, voice tight. "That's not what I meant." Caleb crossed his arms. "Then explain what you did mean." Gavin ran a hand through his hair, pacing once like the porch was suddenly too small to hold him. "I was talking about feeling stuck," he said. "Like my life stopped moving. Same house, same routine, same conversations. I feel like I disappeared somewhere along the way." I watched him carefully. This was the part where he tried to sound reasonable, where he hoped everyone would nod and say, "We get it. Midlife crisis. Happens to everyone." "And whose fault is that?" Nora asked calmly. Gavin looked at her, startled. "What?" "You're describing dissatisfaction," she said. "Not regret over marrying Marisol." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. I stepped in before he could redirect. "You didn't say you felt stuck," I said. "You said you wished you'd chosen a different life, different partner." He turned toward me, frustration flaring. "Because you haven't been here, Marisol." There it was, the pivot. "The garage," he continued, gesturing sharply. "Those stupid cars. You spend more time restoring engines than talking to your own husband. I felt the words hit, but not the way he wanted. Inside, something cold and clear lined them up and examined them one by one. Some of it was true. I had spent more time in the garage over the past few years. I'd poured hours into something that didn't talk back, didn't sigh when I walked into a room, didn't look through me like I was part of the furniture. But truth doesn't erase betrayal. I didn't stop being your wife, I said evenly. I stopped chasing someone who'd already emotionally packed his bags. Travis nodded once, slow. That tracks. Gavin looked at him, incredulous. You're on her side? Travis didn't hesitate. I'm on the side of words meaning something. My father, Harold, who rarely spoke unless he was sure, cleared his throat. You know what strikes me? He said quietly. You didn't ask for counseling. You didn't say you were unhappy. You didn't say you needed help. He looked straight at Gavin. You jumped straight to wishing your wife didn't exist in your life. Gavin's face flushed. That's not fair. It's exact, Caleb said. Gavin's composure cracked then. His shoulders slumped and his voice dropped. I didn't think she'd take it like this. I almost laughed. Instead, I felt something else settle in my chest. So how did you think I'd take it? I asked. He hesitated too long. And that hesitation was louder than any answer. His eyes glassed over. I didn't want this, he said weakly. I didn't want everyone dragged into it. Elaine leaned forward slightly, hands folded, her expression devastatingly calm. Then you shouldn't have said something that ended a marriage, she replied. That was the moment Gavin cried. Not dramatic sobbing, just a quiet breakdown. His face folded in on itself, hands covering his mouth like he was trying to swallow the reality back down. I was just venting, he whispered again. I didn't mean it like that. For 20 years, I repeated, my voice softer now but sharper. He looked up at me, eyes red. I didn't know how to say I was unhappy. You didn't, I said. You said you regretted me. That landed. Even Caleb winced. The porch conversation dragged on another 20 minutes. Gavin explaining, apologizing, contradicting himself, claiming love, claiming fear, claiming confusion. Some of it was honest. Some of it was damage control. When everyone finally stood to leave, the energy felt drained, like a storm that had passed but left the air heavy. Travis stayed behind. Gavin retreated inside without a word, disappearing toward the guest room like a man fleeing a verdict. Travis helped me carry more boxes from the hallway closet, things Gavin hadn't even noticed missing yet. You sure about this? He asked quietly as we taped one shut. You heard him, I said. Yeah, but 20 years is still 20 years. I pressed the tape down firmly. Exactly. And after 20 years, I was still the wrong choice. That night, Gavin came downstairs while I was making dinner. Pasta. Plain. One portion. He hovered behind me, like he didn't know where he was allowed to stand. Are you really going to throw away our entire marriage over one comment? He asked. I didn't turn around. You threw it away, I said. I just stopped pretending it was still intact. That's not true, he insisted. I didn't say I wanted to leave. I plated the pasta. When's the last time you looked at me like you were glad I was here? I asked calmly. He didn't answer. When's the last time you smiled when I walked into a room? I continued. When's the last time you touched me without obligation? Still nothing. I set the plate on the table. You can eat whatever you want, I said. There's food in the fridge. He stood there a moment longer, like he was waiting for me to soften. I didn't. By Friday, the fallout had spread. Gavin's best friend Veronica called me furious. How dare you humiliate him like that? She snapped. In front of your family. I didn't humiliate him, I said calmly. I told the truth. You ambushed him. He told me he wished he'd married someone else, I replied. Would you stay quiet if that happened to you? Silence. Then a sharp exhale. She hung up. The calls I was bracing for came that weekend. First, Kendra. Mom, she said carefully, Dad's really upset. Did he tell you what he said to me? She hesitated. He said he was just having a bad day. Kendra, I said gently. He told me he wished he'd chosen a different life, different partner, after 20 years. There was a pause long enough to feel heavy through the phone. Oh, she said finally, that's really bad. Yes, I said, it is. Logan called later. He didn't dance around it. Mom, Dad says you kicked him out of the bedroom over nothing. Ask him what he said first. An hour later, Logan called back. Jesus, he muttered. I can't believe he said that. Neither could I. What are you going to do? I stared out the kitchen window at the fading light. I'm not going to pretend everything's fine, I said. And for the first time since Tuesday night, I felt absolutely certain of that. 2 weeks passed before Gavin asked for marriage counseling. 2 quiet, careful weeks where we lived in the same house like polite strangers sharing a mortgage. We spoke about logistics, groceries, bills, which days the trash went out. We did not speak about us. So when he finally said it, on a Sunday morning, standing across from me at the kitchen counter like he was negotiating a ceasefire, it almost startled me. "I found a therapist," he said quietly. "Will you go with me?" I looked up from my coffee. "Why?" I asked. His mouth tightened. "Because I don't want to lose our marriage." I held his gaze steady. "You already lost it the night you said you wished you'd chosen differently." His shoulders sagged. "I was wrong," he said, voice cracking. "I was scared and stupid, and I said something I didn't mean." I waited. "I don't actually want a different life," he added quickly. "I want to fix this one." I set my mug down. "Gavin," I said, "I've spent 2 weeks thinking about that sentence, every version of it, and I realized something." He leaned forward slightly, hopeful. "I can't remember the last time you looked at me with love," I continued. "Familiarity, yes. Comfort, habit. But love," I shook my head. "That's been gone for a while, hasn't it?" Tears welled in his eyes. "That's not fair. It's honest." I stood. "I'll go to counseling," I said, "but understand this. I'm not fighting to convince someone I wasn't a mistake." The therapist's office was warm and neutral, the kind of space designed to feel safe without taking sides. Dr. Patel was in her early 60s, sharp-eyed, no nonsense, the kind of woman who didn't let people hide behind pretty language. She didn't waste time. "Why did you say what you said?" she asked Gavin directly in our first session. He twisted his hands together. "I was scrolling through Instagram," he admitted. "One of my friends is traveling through Europe, new cities, new people. She looks so free." Dr. Patel tilted her head. "And that made you wish your wife wasn't your wife?" He swallowed. It made me feel trapped. "Trapped by what?" she asked. "By the routine, the house, the same conversations." His voice dropped. I gave up my career momentum. She kept moving forward. I felt something rise in my chest. "I work 60-hour weeks to support this family," I said. "And you chose that," he snapped before he could stop himself. "You didn't ask if I wanted to go back to work once the kids were in school." Dr. Patel held up a hand. "No," she said calmly. "You didn't tell her you wanted to." The room went still. Then Dr. Patel turned to the question neither of us could dodge. "Gavin," she said, "in that moment, did you mean what you said?" He stared at the floor for a long time. "Yes," he whispered. "In that moment, I did." Something inside me finally settled. Painful but clean. "And now?" Dr. Patel asked. "Now I'm terrified," he said, "because I hurt her, and I don't know how to fix it." "That," I said quietly, "is not the same as wanting this life. That's just not wanting to be the villain." We kept going, week after week. Gavin talked about feeling invisible, about how my time in the garage felt like abandonment, about how he'd stopped feeling desired long before he admitted it to himself. Some of it hurt because it was true. I had checked out. Slowly, carefully, because it felt safer than confronting the growing emptiness between us. But here was the part that mattered. He had checked out too. He stopped asking about my projects except to complain about the time they took. He stopped touching me. He built a separate social world I was never invited into. We didn't explode. We eroded. By week 6, Dr. Patel leaned back in her chair and asked the question that finally drew blood. "Do you want to stay married?" Gavin answered immediately. "Yes." I didn't. I stared at my hands, at the faint grease stain on my thumb from the garage. "I don't know," I said. "I want to, but I can't unhear what he said." Gavin turned toward me, desperate. "That's not true anymore." "How do I know that?" I asked. "How do I trust that next year, or the next time you feel bored, you won't look at me again and think you chose wrong?" He opened his mouth. Closed it? And in that silence, I knew the answer. After that session, something shifted. Not dramatically, not all at once, but the illusion that we were working toward reconciliation quietly died. We kept going to therapy, out of habit more than hope. Gavin talked more, he listened better. He tried, in that earnest way people do when the consequences finally become real. And I noticed it. I also noticed that it didn't fix the one thing that mattered. Every time I looked at him, there it was, hovering between us like a ghost neither of us could touch. She wishes she were with someone else. No amount of insight erased that sentence. By the 8th week, Dr. Patel asked me something privately that landed harder than any confrontation. "What would it cost you to stay?" I didn't answer right away. Then I said, "My dignity." Because staying meant always wondering if I was being chosen or merely tolerated again. We settled into a strange new rhythm after that. Same house, separate rooms, separate emotional lives. We were cordial, careful, polite in a way that felt more distant than fighting ever had. Gavin started working again part-time at a marketing firm. He said it made him feel like himself again. I believed him. And I was genuinely glad. That surprised me. But glad doesn't mean in love. The kids came home for a long weekend in early spring. We didn't pretend anymore. We didn't poison them with details either. We told them the truth. We're separating, I said, and we're going to be okay. They took it better than I expected. Later, Logan admitted quietly, I think we knew something was wrong before you did. That stayed with me. We filed paperwork shortly after. Amicable, clean, no screaming lawyers, no hidden accounts. 50-50. 20 years deserved that much respect at least. On weekends, I spent more time in the garage with Travis, elbow deep in grease, restoring a cherry red '67 Mustang that had been sitting in pieces for months. Metal made sense. Rust told you where it hurt. Engines responded to care or didn't. There was honesty in that. One Saturday afternoon, Gavin stood in the doorway of the garage watching me polish the chrome. It's beautiful, he said softly. Thanks. He lingered. I'm sorry, he added, for what I said, for all of it. I nodded. I know. He waited maybe for more. There wasn't any. He walked away, footsteps fading back into the house that no longer felt like a shared future. I stayed where I was, sunlight catching the curve of the hood, hands steady, heart quiet in a way it hadn't been for years. Some things you can restore if you catch them in time. Others, you don't fix. You just stop pretending they were never broken.